Ramesh, it's a pleasure to welcome you. We were talking about your efforts and your theory that to increase mass employment for 10 to 12 million people, there should be many avenues, and startup is not the only option there. And in fact, we should look at the other way around.
Yes.
So I want to let you take on that.
Definitely, Mateen. I mean, we think about kind of corporate ventures and startup ventures as the two main ways to create employment, have an impact on society, and so on. But I think those models have been copied from the West, especially the new mantra of startups. And as important as startups are, and I have done my own startups, I do my own investments in startups, I mentor many of them, startups may or may not be the right way to have a massive impact and create jobs in a country like India. We might be actually creating a problem. In fact, we might be creating a very toxic situation where by promoting entrepreneurship for the sake of it, we could be turning off lots of youth from doing something that's even more meaningful and can have a massive impact in terms of health and education and transportation and other factors.
It's a very good point you touched, because earlier also I was talking to Montek Singh, and the value system is very critical going into, when you're ramping up your resources for the next generation of youth in India. I think blindly aping anything that the West does is good for any country is not good, because India has been thriving for centuries.
Yeah.
So what works for the West may not necessarily work for India.
Yes.
And I'm coming back to the question of value system, inculcating the right values before we talk about entrepreneurship.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I think there has to be a hybrid model that emerges that's not top-down, highly centralized, and at the same time not leaving it completely to a bottom-up approach of maybe things will emerge on their own. And we have to use a hybrid approach. And so more recently I have been talking about this concept of a venture studio. And the studio approach is like an academic institute, like a research lab, like a startup, like a corporate, but somewhere in between, because in a studio you actually invite lots of people in their youth who really want to go and start something of their own, but are not sure what they should do. And because of the lack of guidance, they go and start another e-commerce company or another dating app, which we need, but not so many of them. And we would rather steer this youth to work in the studios where they work with the right stakeholders and right experts, and so that they're exposed to the right kind of problems, and they get mentorship over a 6 months to a 9 month period, not just theoretical mentorship, but a pathfinder mentorship where they can work with the right structure, and over 6 months to 9 months develop ideas, develop solution, stress test them, and only at the end of 9 months they would think about making that actually a startup. And so we have been doing that in many parts of India in collaboration with other institutes in Hyderabad, in Mumbai and Nasik. And our initial results indicate that this studio model is actually a very powerful model that could be scaled.
Now I'll talk about the education system. You were at MIT Media Lab, and now you're here in Silicon Valley. We always took pride in our education system, at least in terms of STEM courses.
Yes.
Okay? Then we're now talking about being entrepreneurs. So it's not necessary that people who are good professionals or who are good students can take a jump into entrepreneurship. It doesn't prohibit anyone. Anybody can try. But here we have learned in Silicon Valley that entrepreneurship is a very different ball game. You have to have the mindset of a marathon runner, not a sprint runner. When you go and look in India, all these youngsters coming and trying to be entrepreneurs because they have some good role models. We had like Paytm or Flipkart and other companies. Where do you see, if you have to look at a couple of strengths that they have and a couple of challenges which you think they should focus on?
Yeah, I think it's important to make a distinction between kind of well-known names in entrepreneurship, and it's like saying, let's create more Tendulkars and Gavarskars and create a nation of cricketers. What we really mean is that we should create a nation of, healthy athletes, because a healthy lifestyle will pay off in so many ways. We don't need to inspire people to become the next Tendulkar or the Gavaskar. I think the same thing is true for entrepreneurship. We don't want to create, and encourage the youth to say, you should be the next Bansals. I think what's important is that they have an entrepreneurial mindset, but not necessarily a financial entrepreneur. And so I would say that it's more important to think about creating a nation of innovators well before we think about creating a nation of entrepreneurs. Because many of those innovators will go and make an impact, in the society in many ways, and some small fraction of them will take entrepreneurship route and work with other innovators to make an impact. But not every one of them has to be an entrepreneur. But the entrepreneurial mindset is critical. To your question of what are some things that are going well and what could be encouraged, I feel like that entrepreneurial mindset is developing, and we heard some great stories of anecdotal stories of how people who have come from lower middle class are willing to take the risk and jump into entrepreneurship. What we want to avoid is a situation where back in the 70s we also had people from lower middle class who wanted to become the Gavaskar, and eventually their dreams were crushed. And now as a society we all agree that cricket is not a reasonable career choice for our youth. Some of them might become cricketers, and as much as we love cricket, that's not a choice that we impose or look forward to in our youth. And I think the same thing has to be careful about entrepreneurship. As much as we celebrate entrepreneurship, we don't want people to say, what we want to do is all of you to become entrepreneurs. What we should be saying is we want all of you to work on something that's really important and do it in a way where we give you a lot of freedom, a lot of flexibility, a lot of resources to go solve all those problems. And some of you might go create a nonprofit, some of you might go join a government team, some might become a corporate venture, and some of you will think about startup entrepreneurship. And all of those are entrepreneurial thinking, but not necessarily a startup entrepreneur. And our venture system also has to match that,
right.
Because if they're only investing in startups that will become big, then they themselves are doing a disservice. And myself as an investor, I have to be very careful of how I do that. And you need to look at other avenues of how you can promote that entrepreneurship with your dollars, with your rupees, and still see the results, financial returns, as well as the returns in the society that you wish.
It was a very good analogy for cricket.
Yes.
But thank you. Always a pleasure. Appreciate the help.
Thank you, Mateen.